I'm sitting over here, and I'm fucking thinking, and I had a flash of my mind. Here you are, you can't get your money from Larry, and you're not going to. I hate to fucking disillusion you. This cocksucker, what kind of a fucking guy? He couldn't wait for John to die to take the car.
So here's the proof, huh? Give the story because it's better than the truth, huh? Allegories will keep between me and you, huh? We get coins, never scraps. See this a Bitcoin getting cat. So join, get it back, huh? Give the story because it's better than the truth, huh? Allegories will keep between me and you, huh? We get coins, never scraps. See this a Bitcoin getting cat. So join, started federal, grabbed a Colombo. See proof of work, I made it legible. Move out to cyber, was keeping crimes off of the web for you. Started a special group, yeah, I went private. Fell in love with Bitcoin and started mining. That's when I started shining. Getting green, dropping gems. Rocking the comic club, got them sent. They laugh, popping limbs. Give them life, here's the boost. Gotta put in the work, here's the proof. So here's the proof, huh? Give the story because it's better than the truth, huh? Allegories will keep between me and you, huh? We get coins, never scraps. See this a Bitcoin getting cat. So join, get it back, huh? Give the story because it's better than the truth, huh? Allegories will keep between me and you, huh? We get coins, never scraps. See this a Bitcoin getting cat. So join, get it back.
Don't fucking talk to you next time! You're gonna kill me! Please! Oh, you worry about them now? You're gonna kill me!
Welcome, everyone. Episode 3 of Vinny's Proof of Work podcast. I wanted to make a quick video. I've been reading some articles on the Amir Locke shooting and some of the events that led up to it, including of course, the infamous no-knock search warrant that's being discussed and should be discussed. I'm going to play a clip here for those of you that don't know. That gives a little bit of background on what occurred just a few days ago.
Proposed a moratorium on no-knock warrants after police executing one of those warrants shot and killed a 22-year-old man they say was armed. Police video just released and a warning, it is disturbing. Here's Miguel Almaguer.
In under 10 seconds, a Minneapolis SWAT team quietly unlocks an apartment door, storms inside with a no-knock warrant, kicking a couch where a man lying under a blanket with a gun is quickly shot and killed. During the chaos, it's unclear if 22-year-old Amir Locke, who was not named on the search warrant and appears to have no criminal history, was ever aware it was police who were storming into the apartment before 7 a.m. Wednesday.
These events happen very rapidly, and as there's a gun emerging in your direction, you're forced to make a split-second decision about when it's a threat.
With at least 3 shots fired by police, who also released this screen grab showing a gun.
Yeah, so you can see the video there. Even though the shooting took about 10 seconds, there's a lot going on in that video, including how they gained access into the apartment and clearing the apartment and ultimately approaching the couch where Amir was either sleeping or laying down with the gun within arm's reach. I'm going to play another video here of the actual just a shooting again without the news clip.
Police search warrant! Police search warrant! Police search warrant! Hands! Get on the ground! Get on the fucking ground!
All right, here's another video showing the entry in slow motion. So for those of you listening, not watching, what the video shows is that the body camera footage shows that they approach the door. Looks like some kind of apartment. They have a key to get entry into the apartment. once they go into the apartment, you can see officers fanning out to the left and to the right, it looks like, to clear the respective rooms that are on each side, while several officers move forward and approach the couch area. My guess is because they saw the TV was on, that they knew that there was probably somebody sitting or laying there. As they approach the couch while yelling, police, police, several people are yelling, police, police. They kick the couch. You could see Amir, it looks kind of startled, jumps up. The gun appears in his hand very, very quickly. I'll put this on loop here and on mute, but it's hard to really see where the gun comes from, whether it was in his hand when they came in, or it was on that little ottoman. It looks like that might be next to him. But the gun is in his hand. It's kind of pointed out to the side. Reports are that there was an officer on that side that you can't see in camera range that gun was pointed towards, which is somewhat irrelevant at that point. Once the gun is out, the situation has now been escalated to a different point, even if it's not exactly aimed at somebody specifically. Normally, in a normal situation, you're everything else aside, you're justified in using lethal force at that point. But there's a lot of things going on here that I wanted to talk about. First is the difference between a search warrant and an arrest warrant, because they're used somewhat interchangeably. They are very different. When you go apply for an arrest warrant, what you're simply telling the court is that you know that this person who's been suspected of a crime is at a specific location or will be at a specific location, and you're going to use that arrest warrant to gain access onto that property in order to detain or arrest that person. It doesn't give you the right to search the entire house, for example. You can search incident to arrest. You can search the area near the subject that was arrested. So if you arrest the person, let's say, in their bedroom, you can search the nightstand, you can search the bed, but you can't then go search, the kids' room. So the scope of an arrest warrant is very much more limited as compared to the scope of a search warrant. But the point of the arrest warrant is that the person should be there, and you should have information that that indicates that the person's going to be there on that date and time, so that you can arrest them, so you can gain lawful access into the property. The reason being is that police can't just show up to your house and walk into your house and arrest somebody without a warrant. They need a warrant to get into the house unless there are some exigent circumstances that exist. They're going to need that warrant to get in there. So rather than trying to arrest somebody walking around the street where you don't know where they're going to be, if you know that they're at their house every night between X hour and Y hour, you can get an arrest warrant to do that. The search warrant is very different, because the search warrant's claiming that there's something in the house, evidentiary, that you need to get access to, that you could prove is in the house. That could be, computers, that could be drugs, that could be guns, that could be, virtually anything. And the search warrant doesn't necessarily have to be targeting a specific person. It's targeting the evidence that is located inside of that domicile or office building, or whatever it may be. So they are very different, but in practice, in terms of execution, they're executed very similarly. So I've participated in, while I was at the FBI, many search warrants and arrest warrants, even some no-knock arrest warrants. We'll obviously talk about that in a second, the difference. But in practice and how you execute them, it's very similar. So when you go up to a house, there isn't a separate procedure if you're executing a search warrant versus an arrest warrant, because the whole purpose is, how are you going to gain access into the house? And then once you get into the house, if you're executing a search warrant and there are people in there, you still need to get control of those people and make sure that they're not a threat to you. So they can't be wandering around the house. Of course, if you're executing a search warrant, they can't be sitting there locked in their room, destroying evidence. So you have to clear every room just like you would if you were executing an arrest warrant. And then you have to get the people in the house. Usually we would bring them out to like a family room area. We might pat them down depending on the circumstances, clear the couch, make sure there's no weapons, let's say, in the couch, sit them down on the couch and explain what we're doing there, what we're looking for. And most of the time, once that room that they were in has been cleared, they could sit there. Somebody would sit with them, and they would just sit and wait out the search warrant and until the officers were done. If it's going to be a very lengthy search warrant, if there's something you're looking for that's going to take a tremendous amount of time, it's not uncommon that they might actually leave the residence. It's up to them. They can stay inside in most instances, as long as they're not being a problem, if they're not obstructing the execution of the search warrant. If not, then they may be asked to leave or even forced to leave if they're not allowing the officers to or agents to do their job. If it's an arrest warrant, you're in and out much quicker. You're going to go in, you're going to clear the house, you're going to find the individual, you're going to pat them down, you're going to maybe search the area that they were in, which you're legally allowed to do, for any weapons or anything like that. And then you're going to get them out of there quickly. You don't want to hang out at the residence for an hour explaining to the family while, family members are showing up and neighbors are coming out. Sometimes you'll leave a copy of the arrest warrant or search warrant. I would usually just leave information for that family member on how they can contact or find their loved one. So if we're taking them to Brooklyn for processing, or I'm sorry, if we were taking them back to the FBI office in Manhattan, we'd let them know where that office is, but where they'd ultimately end up if they were being prosecuted in the Eastern or Southern District, which is Brooklyn or Manhattan, I'd let them know where the facility was located, where the arraignment would occur later that day, usually, or the next day, depending on the time of day. And so they can contact a lawyer, and that lawyer would then know that, from there, exactly where to go and what to do in order to meet up with their client. No-knock warrants are very interesting because in a normal scenario that I just described, whether it's an arrest warrant or a search warrant, when you, at least on the FBI side, and I know this is going to be different locally because I don't think that, I'm not sure many police departments are doing the due diligence that we did on the bureau side when we did an arrest, and we had to put an entire operations order together on the FBI side. We had to do surveillance on the residence to make sure that we knew who was going in and out of there. We had to make sure that we had a utilities check to determine who's actually on the bills. There's a lot of things that went into it. Sketches of the property. You put your team together. You're going to brief your team on the arrest and instructions. And with that, usually you can avoid a lot of these things that may seem spontaneous or unknown, because there's a lot more due diligence that goes into that. I don't know what the due diligence process is at the St. Paul Police Department, but obviously there's a big question regarding whether they knew Amir was going to be inside this residence or had a reason to believe that someone might be inside of this residence. And if they had a reason to believe that, if they knew that, if they did any checks to see if that person was a licensed concealed carry individual that could be armed. But doing when you normally execute an arrest or search warrant and you get to the door, you'll stack up, with your team on the side of the house or apartment, the wall of the apartment hallway, and you will knock on the door and allow, 20 or 30 seconds of announcing yourself to give them an opportunity to come to the door. With that said, about half the time the people would come to the door, and the other half of the time they wouldn't come to the door. And at that point, you're authorized to breach the door with a tool of your choosing, whether it's a sledgehammer or a door ram. You can breach the door then and go in. At that point, the downside of that, of course, is that a lot of evidence can get destroyed in 30 seconds or a minute. I've had individuals, both on the organized crime side and on the cyber side, destroy evidence in that time period that it takes to gain access into an apartment or home. We had wise guys would hide weapons in the house. They would flush things down the toilet. And on the cyber side, we had people, I remember one instance where by the time we gained access to an apartment, the guy had thrown hard drives out of the window of his Manhattan apartment. And luckily for us, there was a scaffolding. They were doing work probably 3 floors below. So when we looked out the window of his apartment, we could see 3 hard drives sitting there on the scaffolding. So those hard drives were actually in good shape and recoverable. So it does happen. And those are the 2 reasons you would want to no knock, is that if you can articulate that you believe there is a greater than average risk that there's going to be destruction of evidence that's going to occur, or that it's going to present a safety issue for the agents or law enforcement officers going in, meaning people need to understand that when you knock and you say, hey, FBI or police, and you're waiting 30 seconds, you're giving that person, if they do have bad intentions, you're giving them the opportunity to get a gun, load a gun, aim a gun, and, essentially you're walking into an ambush at that point when that door opens. And this is especially true of things like apartment buildings and smaller dwellings, where once you enter the apartment, there is a absolute funnel entering the residence, where there might be 4, 5, 6 law enforcement officers packed into a very, very tight place. So if somebody has a weapon, they could, injure or kill all of them very, very easily. And that's the argument for the no knock. The arguments against the no knock are considerable. I personally never loved the idea of the no knock warrant, because I always put myself in the situation of, if I am a law-abiding citizen or I own a weapon legally, that if someone came to my house and smashed my door down or entered my residence without announcing themselves, I'm not sure my presumption would be that these people are here lawfully. And of course, it doesn't prevent anyone from just claiming they're the police as they're doing a home invasion on your house. And that's a very real thing. In probably around 2008 or 9, we had members of the Colombo family were working closely with several Albanians who had devised a scheme to do a home invasion out in California dressed as DEA agents. So they flew from New York to LA with DEA jackets that they purchased on the internet somewhere. Once they got to LA, they obtained weapons. They put the raid jackets on. They went to a residence and they pretended to be DEA agents, and they went inside and then ended up tying up all the residents of the home and ransacking the house looking for drugs. Now, this was a known drug den, so this is why these things can happen. If you're doing things that are legal, it's a little bit harder of an argument to say, well, when someone came to my door and either said they were police or with a knocked and announced, or just entered with a no-knock warrant and announced as they were coming in, I didn't believe them, because as the law looks at it, if you are participating in something criminal, then it's reasonable for you to know that, for you to understand that at some point the police might show up at your residence, and therefore saying, well, I didn't think it was the police, is kind of a weak argument when you're running a meth lab in the back of your house and you know that at any moment the jig's up and they could show up. Whereas for a normal person, if my house, I'm not running a meth lab in my house. If somebody came into my house in the middle, it's not the middle of the night, it's typically 6 a.m. in the morning. And if they came in at 6 a.m. and I heard someone announcing that they were the police, I would be skeptical of that, because there's a reason the police would be at my house, and they're either there mistakenly and I'm being swatted, or this is a home invasion. And so a person such as myself, who is armed and does have a family, I would be inclined to err on the side of caution and at a minimum, entertain the possibility that this was a home invasion, and more than likely act accordingly and shoot those people coming into my house, because I would assume, knowing that there's no reason for them to be there, that this is a home invasion happening. And I don't want to be sitting there tied up with my family with guys with fake FBI or police jackets going, wow, this is pretty stupid, because I should have known this was not real, because there's no reason to be here. With that said, in this shooting, there's a lot of things that we don't know, which is, as we know, this was a search warrant, not an arrest warrant. They were entering the apartment in all likelihood. We don't know yet. I don't think the search warrant has been released. I couldn't find it, but probably looking for narcotics. The reason why I'm guessing that is because getting no-knock warrants for people involved in the sale of narcotics is fairly easy, because narcotics and guns and violence go hand in hand. So people that are known to have large amounts of dope in their house are also typically known to have weapons to protect that dope, because as I just mentioned to you in my prior life with that fake DEA raid that occurred out in LA, that was because they knew it was a drug den, and they knew that those people inside had weapons, and they knew that there was a chance if they pretended to be law enforcement, they could get them to not use their weapons to defend the drugs and money that were in that residence. So the question is what was the basis of the search warrant? What was the basis for saying they needed a no-knock? If it was because the story, as I read it at one point, said that the initial warrant was for a knock and announce warrant, and then the officers who were going to be executing that warrant, which were a different group, or it might even been a different police department, I think initially, refused to execute the warrant unless it was a no-knock, which tells me that they saw something that in their mind believed made this greater than average threat, that they wanted to have the advantage of going in without knocking and announcing. The problem is, and it's a real problem, is that if you're not considering that there might be somebody in the house who is there, who's a legal gun owner, that you busting in like that is going to prompt a response at a minimum of that person reaching for their gun. And as early accounts of what occurred are coming in, the family at least is stating that he is a legal concealed carrier permit holder, that he was legally allowed to have that weapon. Well, if he's at that house and somebody busts in, his reaction might be, and it's pretty normal and pretty expected, to reach for his gun because he doesn't know what the hell's going on. So did the police know there was another individual in the house? If they didn't, why not? Was there any surveillance done in the house prior to the arrest? Did they and what was the reason for Amir being there? Was he just visiting? Does he normally, I mean, I travel with my weapon all the time, so it wouldn't be unusual for me to be at somebody's house and have a weapon. But is this something that Amir was asked to come over specifically for some reason? Did the people who live there have a reason to believe that they were going to become targets of a robbery and maybe asked Amir to come over to assist them, and it all went wrong and he was basically put in a horrible situation? I don't know. I don't know the circumstances around what led to him being there, but that's an important thing to consider, because from his perspective, he didn't do anything wrong. He was sitting on the couch and heard somebody enter the apartment at whatever time this was and was startled and reached for the gun. A couple things to note. One, they had the keys to go in, which means that they probably spoke with the landlord and were able to obtain the keys. We did that all the time. That's so you don't have to, wreck the door and bash the door down. It also means you're getting into the apartment a lot faster and a lot more surreptitiously, a lot more quietly, sneakily, because you're literally just turning that deadbolt. You're not smashing the door down. The fact that Amir had, if you notice on the video, I'll play it again here. So when he reaches for the gun, something to note, his finger is actually not on the trigger. It's on the receiver where it's supposed to be, which again might mean nothing, but usually indicates to me that the person handling the weapon has had some type of training with it, understands at least some of the fundamentals of gun safety. And so it leads me to believe that there's maybe some credence to the fact that clearly we're going to know whether he was a legal concealed carry, if he had a legal concealed carry permit or not. But it tells me that this person probably does have some type of training, which makes me even more concerned that it makes this shoot look even worse. Just little things like that. They need to really consider, when doing these no-knock warrants, the training involved with coming in contact with somebody who lives in that residence or is visiting that may be legally allowed to have that weapon. And that's something that the more no-knock warrants you're going to do, the more likely that's going to happen. The more that people are choosing to arm themselves, which I do encourage people to do, the more that law enforcement has to understand that there's a possibility they're going to come into contact with someone with a weapon, and that doesn't mean they're a bad guy that's ready to shoot them. Coming in unannounced, really does add to that confusion. Now, who's to say? They could have knocked on the door, announced 4, 5, 6 times, given them 30 seconds or so, and rammed the door down or used the key to open the door and could have gotten shot. That's very possible in these types of scenarios, not specifically this one, but these types of scenarios. But on the flip side of that, you can't have a situation where law enforcement is defaulting to a no-knock warrant, and basically anyone inside with a gun is going to get killed, because at that point the officers are saying, hey, it was a person with a gun, they reached for their gun, I was justified to do it. Yeah, but you're not considering the fact that you're in somebody's house that may not know any of this, what's going on, may not know why you're there. It could be somebody's, you could have a search warrant on a residence related to a husband's conduct that the wife knows nothing about, and the wife's a legal concealed or has a permit. Forget concealed carry. They just have a permit to own the weapon. You come busting in, the wife reaches for the weapon thinking it's a home invasion, and now you smoke her, saying, hey, she reached for the gun on her nightstand as we ran in her bedroom. Yeah, no shit. Because from her perspective, you're just committing a home invasion. They're not going to understand why, if you're legit or not. So I think the default knock and announce puts a lot of that to rest. Yes, it does increase the risk for the officer, but I would argue that in most instances it increases the risk marginally, unless you're talking about a situation where you're executing a search warrant or an arrest warrant on individuals or locations that have a very high probability of violence. And I've definitely participated in those through the years, whether it was gang arrests or La Cosa Nostra arrests on individuals who had committed murder multiple times in the past. In those instances, to me, a no-knock search warrant, all things considered, makes a lot more sense. We're going to have to see what the facts surrounding this search warrant are. What was the reason that they were there? What did they know? And why was it so imperative that they requested one? But it's something that is going to create this situation more often than not when you're coming into someone's house unannounced, and it tragically led to this death. And as this plays out over the next couple of weeks, I'm very curious to get answers to those questions as to why he was there. Was he truly legally allowed to have that weapon? Because that's going to be very, very important. And what were the circumstances that led the police to insist on the no-knock search warrant that ultimately led to this shooting? So just some quick thoughts on that, because I know I've been getting texted on the side by a few people asking about it. So I wanted to put my thoughts out there as to what the pros and cons of these no-knock search warrants are. So hope you enjoy the video, and I will promise to do an update as more information comes out. Take care, everybody.